In today's episode, we're going to have two of our alumni, Dr. Shenali Amaratunga and Salih, telling us about how was their experience staying in Czech Republic after their graduation. Welcome to our today's podcast. I have a great honor of having our alumni today here, Dr. Salih and Shenali Amaratunga. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, just like shortly? Who are you? And then we continue from there. Sarah, you can start first.
So I'm Sarah. I'm from Iraq. But I lived my whole life in Malaysia, with 1 year in Dubai, and then I wanted to study medicine in Europe, and it seemed like to me from all the available English-speaking universities, Charles was the best, and so I came here to study medicine, and
That's amazing.
That's who I am.
So I'm Shenali Amaratunga. Everyone calls me Sheni. I'm from Sri Lanka, born and raised there. Did my whole schooling there until I came here for med school. And over there, it's really hard to get into medicine because of this whole countrywide exam that happens once per year. So I came to Prague kind of unexpectedly, because it wasn't one of my most top options. I wanted to go to English-speaking country, but the schools there were super expensive. And then I ended up coming across Charles University that was meant to have an older English program, more well-known, with good reviews, because there were some that were in other countries that weren't meant to be as good or were newer. And then also I found that the second faculty had some programs like for students who were good achievers, some like scholarships later on based on their grades, and that also looked promising, and that's how I ended up in Prague. But I hadn't been to Europe before, I hadn't been out of Asia, so it was kind of a big step.
That's amazing, choosing Europe and just going after always living somewhere else to something completely different has to be like very, very new and exciting.
Yeah. But it makes it a lot easier when you're moving to one of the most beautiful cities, I think, in the world.
What would you feel like, just like a continuum for this topic, what was like the most difficult part coming here from like outside of Europe, let's say?
So for me, it was the visa, because the Sri Lankan passport is not very strong. So, and we don't even have a Czech embassy in Sri Lanka. So I had to go to India, to New Delhi to like go through my visa process. So that was the hardest thing, that I had to go to another country to go through the interviews there, the paperwork and everything like that. And that part was the most like hectic part. And then of course on the way here on the plane, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to another continent, to a country where I don't speak the language, I don't know anyone, there are no Sri Lankans there, what am I doing? So but logistically the hardest part was the visa, at least for me.
I think for me, it was having to do the entrance exam in Prague. And so like I said, I was living in Malaysia, and to come here, I also had to get a visa. And so that was a whole long, difficult process, because I lived in Borneo, and the Czech embassy was in the capital, so it's a 2-hour flight. And then I came here to do the entrance exam, and then when I got accepted and I went back, I had to repeat the process to get the proper visa to study. And so I would say that was also the most difficult part. Yeah.
So more to your post-graduation time, what made you stay here in Czech Republic after graduation?
So I wanted to do pediatrics the whole of med school. I changed my mind a few times in like 4th and 5th year. I thought some other subjects were also interesting, but then in 6th year I kind of came back to pediatrics, which I always wanted to do. And I always knew that for peds, staying in Motol is one of the best options, because they're one of the best centers for children in this country. So it was rather that if I could work here in Motol, then I will stay, kind of thing. But I also didn't want to leave Prague. I felt like I had learned some basics of Czech, which I think you will get into. And so I didn't want to go from zero from another language elsewhere, for example. So partly that I was so settled in Prague, and the other thing was because there's really like high quality workplaces here that do really good medicine that can be compared with the UK and the US and things. So yeah. that's
interesting, very interesting. I think that's a great aspect for our current students in LF2 to also consider that this is a great option after your graduation as well.
It definitely is a great option, and I don't know why more people don't consider it.
Yeah. And I would also mention that very fast after you graduate, you're able to start specializing, which is not very common in any other country.
Yes.
And you really get to do what you want to do, and not that you're pushed first to do something else, and then you have to push through and just comparing to how it is in Finland, for instance. So I would say that's also one good reasons to stay here. And
And also we know the doctors here, we know the departments, we can do internships in departments that we're interested in to work at afterwards. And so Czech Republic really is a good option. But for me, it wasn't so simple to stay here. I didn't initially decide to stay here. I didn't want to. It's a bit of a long story.
You can tell us anything you want, so go for it. We have time.
So my long story short was when my class graduated, there were two groups of people. The people from Europe, so mainly Germany and Portugal, they went and specialized in their countries. They went home basically, and everyone else almost had the UK in mind. We graduated in a very sweet spot where if you graduate from a EU university, you don't need to take the PLAB exam or any type of exam to be registered with the GMC, the General Medical Council in the UK. And this was for 2 years, just from our year until I think it's gonna stop next year, 2024. Yeah. So we all thought, okay, UK is where we're going. And so we graduated, we did the registration, that took about 2 months, and then we all started applying. And it was quite a disheartening process because, we had just graduated and we had so much energy and we just wanted to get started. And it turned into just sitting in front of the computer all day, applying to any job that came out. Yeah. And so after a few months of this, I got really tired of it. And I was like, okay, well, while applying and waiting, I was working at the anatomy department already, but I wanted some clinical work as well. So I just made a list of all English-speaking clinics in Prague, and I applied to all of them, and a few got back. And the most interesting one that did was the Proton Therapy Center, where I'm working now. So I went and I started, and I still did not intend on staying here. And I was still applying to jobs while starting this really cool new job. And then I made the decision, because I was in a very, very uncomfortable state of, I need to get out of here. I need to start specializing. I need to move on to the next step. And I wasn't enjoying anything. But then I made the decision that, okay, if I don't get a good job offer from the UK in 2 months, I'm going to make the decision to stay here. I'm going to stop applying, and I'm going to really give this place a chance and give Czech a chance. And my brother and sister live here as well, so I already have quite a nice established life. And I wasn't, although I really wanted to go get started and to work over there, I didn't really want to leave what I've built here. And so those 2 months came and went, and I decided to stay, and then I really went full into my work, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and that's how I ended up making the decision to stay.
That's long story made short, in her words. Just to you, Shenali, didn't if I don't remember it wrong, but you didn't say where you're exactly working now. So you said you're working in
Motol in pediatrics.
Yes, and you're in the endocrinology department.
Yes, so when you join work in pediatrics, you kind of course you rotate everywhere, but then after some point you kind of end up in one ward, and it can also have an association with what you do if you're doing a PhD. And I'm doing a PhD at the same time.
Okay.
And that's in the field of endocrinology, so that's become my subspecialty.
Okay.
But otherwise, I just finished my board exams in pediatrics this year.
Congratulations. So we have our specialized doctor already in the room. That's amazing. So I think that's also very interesting, like a balance or like a contrast in between you two. Like there's two ways of doing it, and it's absolutely fine, whatever you want to do. And I think it's very like exciting that you can do it in so many ways. Can you just tell a little bit how it is the applying after, like how do you get the job? How does the process go? I would want to hear from like maybe the model side, more like like this hospital way of doing it, and then how it is like if you are not applying to like these big hospitals, but more like specially to some like facility. So whoever wants to start.
So the biggest mistake I did, which I think is important for students to know if they're going to try it, was to think of it as in the American or British way and just apply to like HR of all the hospitals, which apparently does not work here. You have to like reach out to the Primář or the Prednosta and like show your interest. And usually Czech students do it already quite early in their 6th year. So they do it, for example, already in February or in March, and they show their interest. They put their CV and write an email to ideally the Prednosta, of if it's a faculty hospital like motto. So first I tried to do that, and then I got no replies, and I was like, I'm doing something wrong. And I was going extra to pediatrics, which is also something good to do if you're interested in staying here. So like show your interest, go a bit extra, get to know the doctors. And one of them told me, no, just like write an email to the head of the department, which is what I did. And then I was invited for an interview, and then that's when I started dealing with the paperwork, which was meant to start only after you graduate. Because one of the main things every student will need is when you graduate with a degree from Czech Republic, but not in Czech language, you are regarded as, not as a foreign graduate, of course, they're regarded as a graduate of the country, which gives you some advantages that they can like hire you without having to vet you in some extra way. But in the Ministry of Health, you have to put in your paperwork that comes with the final diploma you get at the graduation. And then with that, you have to apply for a Czech exam, which is kind of similar to what we know from like med school, basically. But it works in 3 parts of a normal conversation until the conversation, like a fake one with the patient. So it's after you get that paper from them is when they can officially hire you as a doctor. To a hospital, which I guess is how it works in other like smaller clinics or in places like the Proton Therapy Center. But at least in faculty hospitals, they won't give you an official contract without this paper from the Ministry of Health, which all English language graduates will need. And it's something you have to start working on like soon after graduation, because when I applied soon after the graduation in July, I got the date for the exam only, like the Czech language exam only like mid-September. So it takes some time.
And the Czech exam, was it like hard? Was it hard to learn to that one? Or if you compare like what you learned during the faculty time, I can imagine that's not enough probably. Or is it?
It varies. I would say the medical Czech should be more or less enough, but what happens to a lot of students and happened a little bit to me is that you reach an all-time high of Czech around 3rd year, and then later on you sometimes lose it, at least the grammar, and then you maintain your medical Czech, right? So I felt like my medical Czech was decent, but my general Czech was really bad. So the first part is like just a conversation where you say why you want to stay, what you want to do, and then you read like this medical text, usually it's about an organ or about a condition out loud, and then they want you to say like what you just read, because they want to make sure you have retention, or just like reading it out loud but you're retaining something. So you summarize it in a few sentences, and then the last part is like the fake patient thing. So I feel like the last part is like the automatic easiest. I think for the reading out loud and then saying sentences constructed by yourself is maybe the hardest part. So I think the first and the last part is easier, and people need to train more to read out loud and like try to summarize what they just read, because that's something we don't really do during med school unless we learn for it, right? So that's but otherwise it wasn't that bad.
That's good to hear.
I don't know, how was your experience?
So when you register with the Czech Medical Council or the Czech Medical Chamber, there's a few papers that you need, and one of them is a police clearance from your country of origin. And so that took me 3 trips to Iraq and 1 year to get done.
Oh, wow.
Nothing to do with the Czech Republic, just because of how difficult it was in Iraq, because I've never lived there, and like the record was problematic, and it took some time. So for me, that was the most difficult part of registering. And it really delayed me because you're not allowed to do anything clinical, really, or to treat patients or to do anything before you get registered. So that took some time. But then once all my papers were in order, the process for applying for the Czech exam is quite easy. It's quite smooth. And then the exam itself is just like Shenali said, it's not so...
It's not so scary.
It's not so scary at all.
No.
It's they're quite friendly, the examiners. And it's quite similar, I think, to the anamnesis practice that we did during med school. So...
one more thing, the PhD, that's also something that's not so easy to do. I think in UK, you can't really just decide to do a PhD, but here it's more like a normal thing that you do PhD than not.
Sometimes expected. You're expected to do it.
Okay. So in Motol, it is expected from you to...
Not any, it depends on the workplace. But some places they offer it to you as something extra. In some places it's more expected. But it's not, the bottom line is it's not hard to start doing one if you're truly interested. And it's, for example, even though I speak Czech fluently now, I'm doing the PhD in English. So that's also possible, because if you feel like you have that level of English and you don't want to be writing papers and dissertation in Czech, you can do it in English. So that's one plus point for sure, that you don't, just because you're in like a Czech board certification system, like I was for pediatrics, I didn't need to do PhD in Czech as well to go in that line.
That's amazing. You're Sarah, are you also doing PhD or no?
No, not yet.
No. Okay. Could you maybe tell us a bit about your like normal working day? I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to the students. Like, what are you doing? Do you have like your own patients, or do you present in some conferences? And tell us a bit more about that.
So my day-to-day is very, very dynamic. It really depends what's going on during that week, during that month. So the foundation of my work is attending meetings like MDTs, multidisciplinary meetings. I work in radiation oncology, which means there's a lot of preparation for the plans, something called contouring, which is like drawing around the CT of the patients and just preparing where the tumor is and how it's going to be radiated. So that is done every day, basically. Then there is, of course, the seeing the patients, consultations with patients, the first meetings, the závěrečné zprávy. And then there's also these emergency phones. So we each have a day that we have the emergency phone. And so that consists of, there's not that many emergencies going on in radiation oncology. So that is mainly when we need to like set up a patient when they're about to get treated and checking CTs, lots of CT checking and stuff. So that's the day-to-day. Then a very large proportion of my work consists of doing research. And so that entails a lot of stuff from like gathering data, reading data, attending meetings, giving presentations, and eventually publishing the data and going on conferences and presenting it, giving talks, da-da-da.
So what I understood, you're traveling a lot. Just tell us a bit like where you have been, because I think that was very interesting when you told me. Yeah. So tell us about like what can you actually do, like the traveling part as well. So I think that would be also very interesting.
Okay, cool. So in June, my company very, very, very nicely sent me to something called PeliCast, which is the Particle Therapy Cooperation Organization, something. So it's the main organization and conference for particle therapy. So that's treatments of cancer with protons, electrons, and now there is also carbon treatment. So that was in Madrid. And I presented a poster, and I met a lot of very, very cool, very influential people in the field. And then one of them, who actually happened to be the president of PeliCast, we got talking and we found out that we have very similar interests in research. We do research in the same field. And so he invited me to give a talk at their center at GSI, which is like close to Frankfurt in, I think, August, September, a few months ago. And so that was the second work trip. And I gave a talk, and that was really cool. And then there's a few more Czech conferences that I've gone to. So there was the Czech oncology one in Czechia something. Not Budovice.
Krumlov?
I think Český Krumlov.
It's fine. It was in Czech Republic. So you have been traveling a lot. Even in the Czech Republic. Good. And something is waiting for you, or is there something?
Yeah. So now we're doing a really big project, and we're going to talk about the results of it in a conference in Glasgow in May. And then this year's PTCOG is going to be in Singapore next year. So that's going to be in June. And then I was also telling you about we're going to start doing some research and speaking about male breast carcinomas as well. And so that's going to be in Chicago.
That's my point. This traveling is insane.
It's really nice. I didn't realize how much traveling was connected with doing research. But it is, and it's absolutely fantastic. And not just obviously for the traveling, but also for the connecting with like-minded people all over the world is very, very, very exciting.
Okay, perfect. And what about you? Do you we kind of traveled away from the what is your normal working day? I mean, you can tell us about that as well, and also if you have some experiences already from
Yeah, definitely. So the work day, usually at least in the pediatric clinic, it starts with kind of this morning sit down with all the doctors, because we have 6 wards under the pediatric clinic. So all the doctors are there at 7:45, and you kind of have a referring of all the new admissions that came over the night before. Then you kind of go your separate ways to your own ward, and there you make a plan with the head of the ward for each patient who is there for the rest of the day. So that's basically the morning. It takes maybe an hour, so there's an hour and a half. So by the time you actually get to ward rounds, it's already 9. And then it's ward rounds. And after that, we just look up patient results, consultations, and so just care of the patients in the ward itself. That's like a normal day at the ward. And now, since I'm specialized, I also have my outpatient clinic, so those days look a bit different. That the morning starts the same with the 2 meetings, but then at 9 I go to my clinic, and there I see 20 to 25 patients with different either diabetics or with endocrine conditions. And then there's the third aspect of it, which are the shifts, which can be weekday shifts or weekend shifts. But currently they're 24-hour shifts, so you basically go to work one day morning and leave the next day morning. And when you have a weekday shift, your day until 4 p.m. looks the same as any other normal day. And then from 4 p.m. is basically you're doing all the acute admissions. And on the weekend, you're doing the acute stuff from morning already. So that's the 3 structures of work. And on top of that, because of my PhD, I'm also doing a lot of research. So when I have some time for research, I'm not in the wards, but I'm in the lab doing something for research. And those days look different. Sometimes I'm analyzing data because I'm doing a lot of something quite genetic, so data on the computer, but there are times I'm also doing something with my hands, isolating DNA, things like that. And thanks to PhD, actually this year I got to travel also a lot, which
amazing.
I've never traveled like this before. But in March I was actually in Buenos Aires. I was selected as one young global fellow in endocrinology based on something I presented last year. So I got to be there in a program with 20 other young endocrinologists, and then that was followed by a conference, which we all got selected for the course, so everything was paid for by the course, and then we all got free admission to the conference that followed, so that was great. And then in June I was in Chicago.
Okay.
It was nice. It was nice. At a big endocrinology conference, and then every year there is a European endocrinology conference that happens. Last year it was in Rome, and this year it was in The Hague. So we were all there as a team. The first 2 places I was alone, and this we all went 70% from the endocrine team. That was great. And then in the middle of that there are also local conferences, and we even just had the local faculty conference, scientific conference, where I presented, and also at the local endocrine conferences, and also local pediatric conferences. So there's quite a lot of speaking events and activities that happen. And as part of my PhD, I got to be for 1 month in the UK and on a clinical internship, as a research internship. So that's possible as well, to like go abroad, to be in a lab somewhere, to collaborate. And exactly like you said, like these opportunities are amazing, because the lab I was in the UK in Exeter, it is run by this person who is in almost every article I read. Like, so he's like the final author in almost all the articles I cite, and I've already seen him like 3 times, and he remembers me. I'm like, this person, like a celebrity in science, knows me. How is it possible?
This is an amazing feeling. Yeah.
But I think it's also very interesting how like early after your graduation, you're already traveling so much, and you're going to conferences and being able to do all of this. This is really, really amazing.
I think these opportunities are something that are quite rare, and it comes with us being able to, exactly as was discussed, like go into specialization early, which I think is an advantage for someone. I always tell med students, it's an advantage for someone who knows what they want to do. I think if someone doesn't know what they want to do, it's good to do some like, for example, the UK system where you spend 2 years everywhere. But if someone knows what they want to do, I feel like that's kind of a waste, and it's good to go directly 100%. To what you want to do. And since we also have the opportunity to do research at the same time, whereas in the UK and other countries you're separated quite often, then it's really like easy and very seamless to combine the clinical work and the research work into one, and then you even get more. The more clinical work you do, the more ideas you get for research as well. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I think that a really good thing that's happening here is the possibility to do both at once, which I think is a pity that other countries don't offer that often.
Yes, I would completely agree. I feel like it's very encouraged. Here to get involved with research, to publish articles, to go on these conferences, and it's so appreciated, and it's really nice, because this is how medicine advances. It's through research. It's not just by the constant rotations in the hospital. So.
And I think it's also motivating for you as a young doctor to also do something else than be 24/7 in the hospital.
Definitely.
So I think that's great.
And to feel like you're making a change.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't touch much about the Czech language, like more than the exam. I'm just like thinking as perspective of if I would be coming from abroad, this is completely new language to me. Would you say that when you were starting, did the clinics, did they understand that your Czech is maybe not still at the level of like having a normal conversation, more like, okay, I can communicate with the patient, but like, did they understand it? Was there some like, and you can be honest, based on the face, I'm like, I'm not 100% sure what we can wait for, but you can say whatever you have on your heart. I'm actually curious now.
I can't pretend that I'm fluent in Czech now. To me, that has been my biggest struggle. It's been the language. I'm not very good with languages in general, and Czech is so different from anything. From anything. You know. Just, it's very difficult for me to remember all the grammatical rules in my head, and so I have had trouble with that. And it's still something I'm having quite a bit of trouble with, and something I'm working on a lot. So I mainly work with English-speaking patients for the time being, but I do have some Czech patients as well. And before speaking to, I mean, now I can manage it. It's fine, and the conversations usually are not predictable, but you know what's going to be said. There's rarely big surprises, so it's been fine. It's more of like a personal discomfort that I can't say everything I want to say and understand 100%. Even 80% to me is a bit, I want to be at 100%. But recently I discovered MasterChef Česko. And so now I spend my evenings watching that.
And being hungry while watching it. That's the worst part. When you don't have anything and you're watching it, they're making something good. But the Czech part.
So doing it with dinner, watching it while dinner is perfect. But I'm just trying to watch as much as I can. And most of my friends are Czech. So we try to speak in Czech, but usually the conversation goes to English. But yeah, Czech has been difficult for me.
it was difficult for me too. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I started considering staying here around 5th year. And at that point, I was, I guess, at the level everyone is at 5th year. You can communicate with the patient, you understand some basic Czech, but it's nothing amazing. And so I slowly started maybe from the end of 5th year to watch Friends in Czech with English subtitles and things like that. So also like some Czech TV, some Czech radio. And then I tried to repeat the grammar rules we learned in Czech, like during medical school. But the biggest improvement happened when at work. I don't know how your first few weeks at work looked, but like being there when nurses either don't speak or don't want to speak to you in English, you feel weird to talk to your colleague in English, right? And the patients don't speak English, or most of them don't. So just having to be there, having to make it through, I had to like concentrate 150%. Every evening I was tired for like 6 weeks, 2 months. I was so tired, like exhausted from the amount of concentrating I had to do. But I have to say they were really supportive. So in the beginning I got kind of like easier patients. I always could ask, like, not the oldest doctor, but someone slightly older than me, to check everything I wrote, because I could ask out loud, like, what is the ending of this, as I was writing. And then after like 2-3 months, I only got the complicated discharge reports checked. After half a year, only like the ones that, for example, everyone will read, like lawyers and, you know, psychiatrists or something. But so slowly I could see that I'm fixing my own mistakes. It's getting better. But I'm pretty sure I spoke super broken Czech in the beginning, because I could understand medically maybe like 70% or 80 even, but non-medically, like when people went to lunch or something, when there was a big conversation happening, I understood like 30%.
Yeah, medical Czech is easier.
Yeah, exactly, because you get some basis in school, right? So
and it's like Czech people talk different than what it is on the paper. It's like we're cutting out things, and it's like, can you say it how you would write it? Can you just like not skip things? And yeah, so it's like the slang type of Czech. So I can imagine it can be really, really tough.
It happened to me a few times that I had like one page in my phone, like in the notes app for the Czech words I didn't understand. It happened minimum like 10 times where I had written 2 words together. I thought it was 1 word. So I had written them down, like, what is this word? And I went and asked a friend, and it was like, oh, it's 2 words like this. I was like, okay. So like people talk exactly how you said, they talk differently. And so to get used to that, it took a while longer. To get used to like patient interaction and things, we had quite a lot of it in med school. That was better, but to overall make your like vocabulary better took longer. And the first few months are very exhausting. But like the more you're in it, I feel like the important thing is to immerse yourself, which at least when I was starting to study 10, 11 years ago, we didn't have so much contact with the Czech students, which I think now the newer years have tried to change. So I think that's also like a big advantage, because I didn't have many Czech friends through med school. Only after, when I came to work. So I feel like that's something that I've seen through like the organizations and things that have slowly changed. So I hope that's something that will help everyone to improve their overall vocabulary and not just medical Czech.
And I think even though you wouldn't stay here, I think it's important to still be able to understand something. Not only for the like that you're able to talk in the shopping mall and whatnot, but also for yourself, because you're not going to understand anything in the patient cases. And it's just more comfortable if you're able to do some basic
it's also
mingling.
a cool language, I think, even though it's super hard and it has a bad rep. It's a very, very cool language to speak. And I'll say one thing about you. I remember one time we were walking down these stairs, and I think you had graduated like 1 or 2 years before. You had just started working. And we were going down the stairs, and you were coming up the stairs with some Czech colleagues, like from Motol. And you were just speaking fluent Czech. And as you walked past, me and my friends just turned back in shock.
Is it her?
We were so impressed.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure half of them was bad Czech. I'm glad it came off well.
You were confident enough to show that it was good. So for sure, this was the hardest thing, probably starting. Anything else that really like pops to your mind that was like really hard at the beginning?
For me, it was hard that like 95% of my colleagues from like uni left. They all went back either to their home countries or to Germany or the UK. And only 2 other people tried to stay, but one only for PhD without the clinical part, and the other one is like half Slovak, so it was not a big change for her. So I just felt like I had to start over, and at work I felt the need to make friends, and it's not so easy in the beginning, especially when you don't speak the language, to make friends out of the blue. And these people, they have friends, they did med school here too, and they have families, they don't need you. So that was really hard to like kind of get over this, that a whole bunch of people you knew and liked have gone, and you have to kind of start from zero. That was kind of hard as well.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah, so you consider that the same, that was like the second hardest, or like...
In terms of what? In terms of working
here?
Or...
Yeah, just like generally staying afterwards, after graduation in Japan.
Yeah, I would say the very quick exodus of all of our friends is very difficult, and the Czech. But apart from that, I have to say the environment is very supportive here. Okay. I mean, at my work, I feel extremely supported, and I have 2 other friends who stayed, and I think they feel quite supported as well. And
yeah, for me as well. Like, really, I have to say, in the beginning, they were very slow with me. They even told people to talk to me only in Czech, so I learned faster and to control what I like, to check what I need. And I could always turn to anyone. And even in some conversations where they kind of were going fast or saying something colloquial, I found themselves often catching themselves and being like, wait, did you catch that? Do you know what this is? Yeah. So they were really considerate. So they made it very easy for me to learn. And I can't imagine how I would have made it without that. Because they were definitely not judgmental and not being like, you go learn because you came here, so why don't you know it already?
That's great.
Yeah.
On the contrary, I feel like the attitude is they're very happy that you've chosen to stay, that you decided to stay, and they try to give you as much support as possible, and I think they make it quite comfortable.
That's good. That's good.
I think many people don't know this. They don't expect that, I feel like.
I think so. So that as a perspective from the student side, I think we are all kind of like, nobody wants us to stay here like afterwards. So I think that this is great to hear also for our students, that it's actually on contrary.
It wasn't even a consideration in my year for anyone to stay. No one considered it except the two people that
I think it's getting more popular now, like
I
staying
hope so,
here.
because it's a really good place. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. Last question: if you could go back to your like medical years, what would you give yourself as an advice to your like younger self? If you could go back and like slap the person a bit and be like, I'm going back to the slapping, I have a problem. So yeah, if you could go back, could you like? What would you say to yourself? So
last week, we did a panel talk with the anatomy students, and a similar question was asked. And so what I said was, at the end of one of my exams, my last exam in 6th year, so the day I became a doctor, me and my friends became doctors, the examiner came out of the room and he said, so you all finished now, you're all doctors. And we're like, yeah. And we're all really happy. And he's like, now you're here. From now on, it's only like this. And in a way, we were like, oh, this pessimistic guy. But he was correct in a way that every phase has its difficulties. And so med school was hard, but it was also so easy because you have a clear focus and a clear target. And when you leave, there's so many questions and things you have to figure out. Yeah. And real life hits you. So med school shouldn't be something you want to just finish, get out of the way, because it's 6 years. I feel like a lot of us had, and students now probably have, this very understandable attitude of okay, so next test, got to finish it, got to finish the next exam, finish this subject, move on to the next year, finish this year, finish the next year. And before you know it, 6 years have passed and you're 25, 26, 27, however old. So I would say to just not, to enjoy the moment and do my best, but also know that this is also a very important phase of my life that I shouldn't want to just quickly finish and move on with.
I think that's a great advice.
I completely agree. I was about to say something very similar because I felt like that period went by really, really quickly. So I would rather have liked to stop and smell the roses as it went along. Kind of be more immersed in the situation than to try to pass it by. And then if I had decided earlier if I wanted to stay, I would have definitely tried to learn the language a bit more, made some more Czech friends, kind of made a bit more roots here than I had when I did stay, because I felt like then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm staying and I kind of have no one. Yeah.
I think that's amazing ending for this episode. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
I'm really happy to be able to have this talk with my mentors, basically. So it's great. Thank you everyone for listening to us today and hope you enjoyed.